Welcome to our online edition of Question and Response. We at Redeemer Lincoln Square, we value questions and those who ask them, which is why after every Sunday service, we answer questions that you text in, whether it's about faith or Christianity in general, and somebody from our pastoral team tries to deal with them. Now, in this particular series, we're trying to deal with some of the key questions that people have about who Jesus is and what he's about, or just the most frequently asked ones. So whether you consider yourself a Christian today or not, we invite you to participate with us in this discussion. Now, for today's question. Hello everyone, welcome back. We're excited to deal with today's question with Ginny Owens, who's our Swiss Army knife here at Redeemer Lincoln Square. She most recently has served as our interim women's ministry manager and has done a lot of other stuff here at Redeemer Lincoln Square. Ginny, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing good. We're filming from our office space here at Times Square. Yes. It's our new space. You can see the ads outside. No, they're not as distracting as they look once you get used to them. Ginny, are they distracting to you at all?
You know, they're not. It's so great. They're just not even remotely distracting.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, well, let's deal with today's question that is a doozy. It's why do you trust the Bible? Or how can I trust the Bible when it seems like there's so many inconsistencies there? And I think there's actually two categories I would put this question. There's technical inconsistencies that people have or contradictions, and there's moral ones. The technical ones and I've seen all the same websites, I've seen all the same books where people try to list all these, and what I try to encourage people to do is to really go further into study of these things, because often when you just do a little bit of work, you realize, wait a second, you know, if the reason why the Samuel writer says 100,000 people were at an event, and then the King's writer says 10,000 people were at an event, at the same event, that's not an inconsistency when you consider that people tend to count different ways. Some people count all the people, some count certain people. Same thing happens when it gets to the Gospels, that there seems to be variations on the same event. But when you do a little bit of work, the Bible is one of the most scrutinized books in the entire world. There's lots of reliable material that actually goes into and explains how what looks like might be a contradiction actually isn't. That's technical. Now, as far as moral contradictions, what would you say, Jenny?
Well, one of the things that I think is an easy start to this answer is, you know, when we read the Bible, we sometimes think that when it reports things to us, it is condoning those things, and that is not the case. So, for instance, in the Old Testament, you have quite a bit of polygamy. So you have guys marrying multiple women. That never works out. But rather than sort of commenting on that, the Bible often will just open the story to you. Yes, present the story to you. Yeah, so that is one thing. But then the other thing that we have to sort of question is, you know, where do we get our morality from? And of course, as Christians, we would say we have in the Bible a whole, you know, very elaborate and very concrete set of principles where we can learn justice. We can learn, you know, what does mercy look like? We can learn what is right and wrong, what is good and bad. But we all have to sort of evaluate that, don't we, where we're getting our ideas from.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to what you said earlier about the Bible, you know, is it prescriptive? Is it telling me how to live, or is it descriptive? Right. I think you're absolutely right that a lot of times it's just descriptive. But then you brought up a great point, Jenny, which is that if you're going to judge the Bible morally, you have to ask yourself, where are you getting your morals from? And the Bible actually obviously says you get if God has given us these values, this is how we were made, that's where they come from. But if you're going to say, hey, my culture says this is wrong, we have to look back and say, wait a second, 100 years ago, culture believed that this was the right way to live, and we look back at them and say, well, that's regressive. And we know then that 100 years from now, in the future, people are going to look at us and say, well, that's regressive. And since if that means culture is just relative, then why are we basing on this particular culture at this particular time, this particular social location in America? I agree with you. I think it's problematic, you have to ask yourself, before to judge the morals, where are you getting your morals from? Like justice and morality. Well, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we also, the beautiful thing, I will say, going to seminary, I have been amazed at just the how from the beginning to the end, the Bible is woven together so wonderfully and shows us so much about God's truth. And so one of the things that I love to point out to people is that from the beginning to the end of Scripture, we see God seeing people. We see him giving hope to those who are, women who were not valued in society at the time, to the poor, to those with disabilities. And so we can see this story, and I think, a lot of times people say, well, the Bible is oppressive to certain people groups, but when you read it as a whole and you see all of the connections, it is not. And in fact, when you especially look at the New Testament, the first witnesses, many of the first followers and supporters of Jesus Christ were women. They were walking with him, taking care of him, but also just beautifully changed by him. And we also then see in the early church that the people who were center in the early church were often widows and slaves and the poor. And again, the rejects of society that God brought together to reflect his beauty and his glory. And, he's calling us still to that idea today.
Yeah, so what you're pointing out is that actually the Bible tends to contradict the power structures that every culture kind of comes to, and therefore, because of that, it actually comes into all of our cultures and ends up saying and challenging us. So,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for coming, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you have more questions, please email us at lsq@redeemer.com. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time.